The distress call was faint, distorted by static, yet unmistakable in its urgency. Across the cold void, alien relays repeated the signal until it reached the grand chamber of the Council of Concordant Species. Representatives of a dozen worlds leaned forward as the message played again, a broken plea for help from a frontier colony under attack, voices trembling with terror before the transmission cut to silence. The chamber's usual atmosphere of calm deliberation fractured into uneasy whispers. For most, the problem was simple. Resources were stretched thin. Warships were committed to defensive perimeters, supply lines already strained, and no one wanted to risk valuable fleets for a colony so far beyond the core. Their world was already half-ash, perhaps fully lost. Some suggested dispatching negotiators if the raiders could be reasoned with. Others argued it was better to abandon the place entirely. The debate turned sharp until a counselor with hardened ridges along his skull leaned forward and spoke words that silenced the chamber. "There is another option," he said. "Forward the signal to the humans." The suggestion hung in the air like a poisonous vapor. Even the name carried weight. Deathworlders. The humans, born of a violent cradle, had earned their reputation. Other civilizations might boast vast fleets, elegant technologies, or ancient wisdom, but none inspired the same blend of fascination and fear as humanity. They were predators in thought and deed, a species whose survival instincts eclipsed diplomacy, whose every invention bore the fingerprints of struggle. Most worlds avoided them. The Council had never once invited their aid. Yet the idea gained traction. Sending their own ships risked losses. Sending humans risked something else. But the humans were expendable in the eyes of many counselors, a useful fire to cast into the darkness. If the raiders were destroyed, it would be the humans' doing. If the humans themselves were destroyed, then one less danger would prowl the galaxy. And so, with cold pragmatism, the signal was redirected. On the other side of space, far from the council chambers, Commander Elias Voss listened to the crackling plea in a dimly lit operations room aboard the Iron Requiem. His expression remained unreadable, but his silence held weight. A scar traced down from his temple to his jaw, a reminder of the countless campaigns that had shaped him. When the recording ended, he exhaled slowly and leaned forward on the table. "They didn't send aid," he muttered. "They sent us." At his side, Lieutenant Marcus Hale adjusted his spectacles, though the lenses were more interface than glass. Barely 30, Hale's mind worked faster than most ship computers, but his youth had not dulled his curiosity. "Coordinates are real," he confirmed. "The colony's still transmitting a weak emergency beacon. Hostiles haven't jammed it fully. Looks like raiders. Numbers hard to pin down." Across the room, Sergeant Rowan Kane laughed without humor, leaning back in his chair with his boots crossed on the table. His voice was gravel, his grin sharp. "Raiders, eh?
Could be fun.
Better than rotting in orbit." His broad frame and knotted muscles looked more suited to smashing down bulkheads than sitting still. Voss fixed him with a steady gaze. "We don't fight for fun, Rowan. We fight because no one else will." "Same difference," Rowan muttered, though the edge of loyalty in his tones softened the words. The commander paced the room, considering. He knew why the council had sent this to them. To other species, humanity was a tool to be used when desperation outweighed caution. Yet he had no illusions. Every battle was a test, not only of survival but of reputation. Humanity's place in the galaxy had never been built on friendship. It was built on fear, on the understanding that they endured where others fell. "We deploy at once," Voss said finally. "Marcus, prep the dropships and check our ground drones. Rowan, get your men armed and ready. I want the squad tight and mobile. No mistakes." "Already ahead of you," Rowan said, rising with a predatory grin. Hale's voice was quieter. "Sir, do we even know if the colony is worth saving? If the raiders have already—" "Doesn't matter," Voss cut in. "They sent the call. We answer. That's what separates us." He paused, his eyes narrowing as though staring through the walls to the stars beyond. "And if the council thought sending us was safe, they've forgotten who we are." The preparations began with practiced efficiency. Weapons were checked and rechecked, armor sealed, tactical feeds updated. The iron requiem thrummed with energy as engines shifted course, angling toward the desperate coordinates. The crew moved with the precision of veterans who had walked through too many battlefields to count. Each knew the risks. None hesitated. As the ship streaked through the void, Rowan leaned against a bulkhead, strapping magazines into place. "You think they'll be glad to see us?" he asked, half to himself. Marcus shook his head. "They'll be glad to live, but glad to see us." He hesitated.
"No."
"They'll be terrified. They always are." Rowan chuckled darkly. "Good. Fear keeps them quiet." From the command deck, Voss watched the stars slide into elongated lines as they made their final jump. His thoughts turned not to the Council, not to the colony, but to the weight of humanity's name. They were predators sent into a cage of prey, unleashed not because they were trusted, but because they were feared. And yet that was enough. Humanity didn't need permission to prove its place. The NAV computer chirped, announcing arrival in system. The stars snapped back into clarity, and ahead, the scarred planet hung in the void, its surface glowing faintly with the ruin of bombardments and spreading fires. The emergency beacon pulsed weakly, a heartbeat against silence. No friendly fleets waited nearby. Only the shadows of hostile signatures prowled the orbits, scavenger ships fat with plunder. "Contact," Marcus reported. "Multiple raider vessels. Scattered, disorganized. They don't expect resistance." Voss straightened, his expression carved from stone. "Then let's teach them expectation." The dropships roared to life, their hulls trembling under the force of launch. Inside, men strapped in, faces hidden behind helmets, but eyes burning with the anticipation of impact. The colony below awaited them, a world in ruin, its people cowering beneath the boots of raiders, waiting for salvation that the Council would never send. But salvation was not what they would receive. As the dropships cut through the atmosphere, Rowan tightened his grip on his rifle, a savage grin curling beneath his visor. "Time to remind them why they whisper our name." And Commander Elias Voss, gazing into the fires of the battlefield below, spoke the words that set the tone for everything to follow. "When death calls," he said softly, "only we answer." The dropships slammed through the clouds like blades, their hulls rattling under hostile fire as tracer rounds streaked upward. Inside, the men sat in silence, every vibration of metal against atmosphere a reminder that death waited below. Commander Elias Voss stood at the fore, strapped in only by habit, his posture calm against the chaos. His eyes flicked across the tactical display projected before him, red swarming over the colony's burning districts. The colony was worse than the report suggested. Cities lay half-collapsed, smoke rising from gutted towers. Civilians fled through shattered streets while raiders in scavenged armor herded stragglers like cattle. Looted transports hovered over plazas, their holds heavy with stolen supplies. For a moment, even the hardened soldiers inside the dropships absorbed the devastation in silence. Then Voss broke it with a voice steady enough to steel their nerves. "We're not here to mourn. We're here to end this. Drop hard, strike fast, and keep them guessing." The dropships tore across the sky and flared open their ramps. Sergeant Rowan Kane was first out, landing in a crouch with weapon raised. His laughter carried over comms like the growl of a predator unleashed. Bullets sparked against his armor as he returned fire with ruthless precision, each burst dropping an enemy where they stood. Behind him, his men fanned out, their boots hammering against the broken ground. Lieutenant Marcus Hale remained closer to cover, his rifle slung across his chest as his fingers flew across a wrist-mounted console. He had already infiltrated the raiders' comms net, scattering their frequencies with bursts of static and false commands. Through the chaos, he fed targeting data to Rowan's squad, his voice calm, clinical. "Left flank, 3 approaching. Rooftop sniper marked, 2 seconds until blind." The sniper's scope flickered, jammed by Marcus's intrusion, and Rowan wasted no time. A single shot cracked, and the raider toppled from the rooftop in a spray of dust and blood. Voss descended with the second wave, his stride measured, rifle tight against his shoulder. Where Rowan fought with feral brutality and Marcus with cunning precision, Voss was methodical, each shot calculated, each order designed to shape the battlefield. Cut their retreat. Funnel them into the plaza. Make them choke on their numbers. The raiders tried to rally, but humans fought differently than any enemy they had faced. Aliens in the crowd, huddled civilians peering from the rubble, watched wide-eyed as men from Earth advanced not in rigid formations, but in shifting waves, adaptive and merciless. One moment they fought as individuals, the next as a single organism, each man's movements anticipating the other's. Rowan dragged a raider from cover, slammed him against the wall, and ended him with a knife, his visor splattered red. "Come on, you cowards," he roared into the smoke, his voice amplified by helmet speakers. "You came to pillage. Now face predators." The effect was immediate. Panic rippled through the raiders' lines. They fired wildly, their discipline shattered, and in their hesitation the humans surged. Marcus's interference sent false orders across their channels, convincing half a squad their reinforcements had retreated. The raiders stumbled into an ambush Rowan had prepared, and the street filled with screams. The alien survivors, clutching their children in shattered doorways, struggled to reconcile what they were seeing. To them, battle was usually a calculated exchange, warnings, positioning, minimal casualties if possible. But these humans fought like they were born of war itself. They took cover only to spring from it, charged headlong into danger, and used their own pain as weapons. Fear did not slow them, it sharpened them. One elder, his body shaking with age, whispered to another, "They fight worse than the raiders." Yet even as he said it, his eyes stayed fixed on the humans who were, for the first time, forcing the invaders back. Amid the wreckage of a courtyard, Voss paused to survey the field. His visor dimmed against the blaze of burning structures as he calculated their next move. The raiders were retreating toward their ships, but he could see the formation, chaotic, disorganized, already breaking. "They're not soldiers," he said quietly to himself. "They're scavengers who've never met real resistance." Then, louder, to his squad, "Drive them harder. Don't let them regroup." Rowan's laughter echoed across the comms. "With pleasure." The humans pressed forward, herding the raiders into tighter corridors where their numbers meant nothing. Grenades bounced against walls, detonating in thunder that shattered stone and bone alike. Marcus timed his intrusions so that enemy guns locked at the moment they were most needed. Voss advanced like a shadow of inevitability, his rifle carving precise lines of death through the smoke. It was not mercy. It was not clean. It was survival made manifest in every movement. By nightfall, the plaza at the colony's center belonged to the Deathworlders. Fires burned unchecked, casting orange light over the bodies strewn across the stone. The remaining raiders had fled into the wilderness, their morale shattered beyond repair. The civilians emerged hesitantly, drawn by the silence that followed slaughter. They stared at the men who had driven their tormentors away and found no comfort there. Rowan removed his helmet, sweat glistening across his scarred face as he stretched his shoulders. Not bad for a warm-up. Marcus was quieter, his eyes still on his console. "They'll regroup." Word spreading across their bands. "They'll bring reinforcements." "That's what we want," Voss replied, stepping forward. He looked at the civilians clustered near the ruined fountain, their faces pale and fearful under the firelight. He could read their thoughts as clearly as if they had spoken them. These were not saviors, these were monsters in different armor. He did not correct them. Instead, he simply said, "You're alive. That's enough for tonight." Then he turned back to his men. "Set defenses. Tomorrow we teach them fear." The words settled heavy in the night air. The civilians exchanged uneasy glances, torn between gratitude and dread. And somewhere beyond the horizon, raider reinforcements already stirred, unaware that the humans awaited them with sharpened teeth. "You said." Night bled into dawn beneath a haze of smoke that clung to the ruined colony. The plaza, once a place of trade and laughter, had become a fortress of debris and hastily erected barricades. Commander Elias Voss moved among his men with measured calm, his presence steadying, his words few but decisive. He knew the quiet was temporary. Raiders were not disciplined, but they were vindictive, and vengeance was as predictable as sunrise. Lieutenant Marcus Hale crouched near the fountain, his console tethered by wires to what had once been a colony communications hub. Sparks leapt as he rewired scorched circuitry, his fingers quick despite the grime staining his gloves. He spoke without looking up. "I've seeded false transmissions across their network. They'll believe reinforcements are massing where none exist. If they're stupid enough to trust their own comms, they'll be blind." Rowan Kane leaned against a fractured pillar, helmet off, chewing on a strip of dried rations as though the battlefield were a tavern. His grin carried the same violence as his rifle. "Blind rats are still rats. You stomp one, 5 more scurry out. I say let them come thick, so we don't waste time hunting." Voss regarded them both. Marcus, young and calculating, already thinking 10 steps ahead. Rowan, brutal and eager, dangerous even to his allies if not for his unshakable loyalty. They were extremes of humanity's nature, and he balanced them with a soldier's discipline. "They will come thick," he said. "And when they do, we'll make their fear heavier than their numbers." The first assault came at midday. Raiders poured from the alleys with guttural shouts, their weapons blazing, their ferocity born of desperation. The humans did not retreat. Rowan sprang from cover with a roar, hurling grenades that shattered stone and bodies alike. He met the survivors in close combat, knife flashing, his laughter cutting louder than their screams. Marcus triggered concealed drones he had hidden through the rubble. They erupted in synchronized bursts of gunfire, herding the raiders into kill zones mapped with clinical precision. His voice echoed calm through comms as chaos unfolded. "Left corridor collapsing. Cut them off. Target cluster at Sector 3, now." Voss directed the flow, his command sharp and unyielding. He shifted squads like pieces on a board, collapsing fronts where needed, reinforcing pressure where weakness appeared. He did not waste words on fury or promises. His men followed because his strategy was survival embodied. The raiders broke, retreating under the weight of human ferocity. Their dead littered the courtyard, their wounded dragged into shadows. The civilians who had witnessed it all remained hidden, trembling behind barricades, unable to decide whether the men from Earth were guardians or devils. In the aftermath, Voss gathered his corps beside a cracked monument at the plaza's edge. "They'll be back," he said, voice quiet, certain. "And not in handfuls. They'll bring numbers, heavier weapons, maybe ships. They want this colony broken. We'll give them something worse." Marcus's eyes gleamed with cold anticipation. "I can reroute their landing signals. Make them disembark into dead zones. If we're clever, they'll trap themselves." Rowan wiped blood from his blade and sheathed it. "Let's not just trap them. Let's break their spirits so bad the survivors can't even whisper about us without shaking." The civilians overheard fragments, their fear deepening. One whispered to another, "These humans aren't saving us. They're waging war through us." Yet none dared protest, for the alternative was the return of raider blades. When the second wave arrived, it came with thunder. Dropships streaked down from the atmosphere, disgorging squads of armored raiders armed with heavier ordnance. Explosions tore through the colony's outskirts as they advanced in force. But the humans had prepared. Marcus's false coordinates lured 3 ships into a narrow ravine, where Rowan and a squad detonated charges that turned stone walls into crushing tombs. Elsewhere, Voss directed ambushes with the precision of a surgeon, whittling larger forces into panicked fragments. The colony shook under the violence. Fires spread unchecked, smoke blotting out the pale sun. Amid it all, humans fought with a savagery unmatched. Rowan led a charge through shattered buildings, his rifle empty, his knife wet, each strike more brutal than the last. He fought not like a soldier, but like a beast unchained, and yet behind his fury lay iron loyalty. None of his men fell while he drew breath. Marcus's tactics bent the raiders into confusion. Their comms screamed with contradictions, orders that sent squads into ambushes or left them stranded. To the raiders, it seemed the humans were everywhere at once, shadows with endless teeth. And Voss stood at the heart, unflinching. His voice carried calm through the storm. Hold your ground. Bleed them here. Let them learn fear by inches. He fired with precision, every shot ending a life, every command preserving his men. The battle stretched into hours, a relentless tide broken upon unyielding stone. By dusk, the raiders fled once more, their corpses littering the streets, their reinforcements shattered before they could establish control. The survivors of the colony emerged again, eyes wide, voices hushed. They saw the raiders broken, yes, but also the men who had broken them, humans standing bloodied, unbowed, their armor scarred, their visors gleaming with cold fire. Gratitude warred with terror in every glance. An alien elder approached Voss, trembling as he spoke. You fight like no other. But at what cost? You burn our city to save it. Voss regarded him without malice, his scarred face unreadable. Better a burned city than a dead people. You called for salvation. What you got was survival. The words spread through the crowd, heavy as stone. Some wept. Some turned away. None dared argue. Night fell once more, the colony reduced to a battlefield strewn with corpses and ruins. The men of Earth stood watch among the wreckage, their silhouettes etched against flames. They had won, but victory had a taste of ash, and beyond the horizon, larger forces surely gathered. Rowan spat into the dirt, his grin feral even in exhaustion. Let them come again. I'm not done yet. Marcus's fingers danced across his console, already weaving new deceptions. They will. And when they do, they won't understand until it's too late. Voss lifted his gaze to the stars, his expression calm, his thoughts a silent weight. Humanity had been unleashed, not as rescuers, not as friends, but as predators answering a call. And predators did not stop until the hunt was finished. The colony slept uneasily that night, caught between relief and dread, knowing the raiders would return in greater force and that the humans would be waiting, with sharpened steel and darker resolve. You said. The third day dawned red, the horizon painted by smoke and fire. The colony had become a crucible, and the raiders, humiliated by defeat after defeat, returned in force. Their fleet blotted out the stars, dropships tearing through the atmosphere in coordinated waves. Where before they were scattered and reckless, now they came as an army bent on annihilation. For the civilians hiding among ruins, it was the end. For the humans, it was the challenge they had awaited. Commander Elias Voss stood atop the cracked steps of the central plaza, his armor streaked with soot and blood. His men arrayed themselves behind makeshift barricades, silent, resolute. He spoke into the comms with a calm weight of inevitability. This is their last push. Break them here, and they'll never return. Stand fast. Today we end this. Rowan Kane checked the edge of his blade with a grin that never reached his eyes. His rifle slung at his back, he carried explosives strapped across his chest like trophies. End this? I was hoping we'd drag it out longer. Nothing sweeter than watching them choke on their own fear. Marcus Hale's console glowed with shifting data streams, his voice sharp, deliberate. They've tightened their encryption. Harder to mislead, but not impossible. Give me 10 minutes. I'll turn half their orders into suicide runs. He glanced up briefly, his expression pale but determined. We're outnumbered 20-1. Even with misdirection, this will be ugly. Voss answered with steel in his tone. Then let it be ugly. Survival was never meant to be clean. The first wave descended like a storm. Dozens of raider ships screamed into the outskirts, their troops pouring through fire and ash. Artillery shook the ground, towers crumbling as civilians clutched each other in underground shelters. But the humans met the tide with fury sharpened by discipline. Rowan led the charge through collapsing streets, detonating charges that swallowed entire squads in thunderous fire. He fought as though pain were a companion, a predator reveling in carnage. His laughter, broadcast over the comms, became a weapon of its own, rattling the raiders' nerves until their volleys grew wild. Marcus twisted their communications mid-assault, sending coordinates that guided dropships into dead zones mined with traps. Entire units landed only to be obliterated in flames, their screams echoing through scrambled channels. His fingers flew faster than thought, sweat running down his temples, but his voice remained steady. Another squad neutralized. Corridor 4 collapsing in 3 seconds. Move. At the heart of the chaos, Voss directed with precision. He shifted his men like flowing water, striking where the raiders faltered, withdrawing before numbers could overwhelm. He did not waste strength on bravado. He saved it for ruthless clarity. Each command carved order from the storm. His rifle spoke when words were unnecessary, every shot exact, every strike a lesson. Hours passed like years. The colony shook under the weight of battle, its plazas drowned in blood and fire. The raiders fought with desperation, their commanders bellowing orders through failing comms, but they could not break the humans. Every push was answered with brutality, every advantage twisted into a trap. And slowly, terror spread. Raiders who had come for plunder now fought only to escape. Their discipline crumbled as whispers passed among them. Deathworlders. Monsters in flesh. Predators in human skin. The legend was writing itself in blood before their eyes. By dusk, the final dropship screamed skyward, fleeing the battlefield. The colony lay in ruin, but the invaders were gone, their dead piled high across the streets they had once claimed. Silence spread, heavy, oppressive. The survivors crept from hiding, eyes wide, gazes fixed on the men who had driven death itself into retreat. Rowan stood among the wreckage, his armor blackened, his grin faded into exhaustion. "They'll remember this day," he rasped, voice rough from smoke and shouting. "Every last one of them will whisper our name before they sleep." Marcus pulled his console free, its surface cracked, his hands trembling from hours of unbroken strain. He looked at Voss. "It's over. For now." His tone carried no triumph, only a wary respect for what had been unleashed. Voss surveyed the ruin, his expression unreadable, the weight of command pressing harder now than in battle. He knew victory was not salvation. He saw the civilians, their faces torn between gratitude and terror, children clutching mothers, elders whispering prayers. They were alive because of humanity, yet they recoiled from the very men who had saved them. When the council ships finally arrived, sleek and unscarred, their representatives stepped onto a world they expected to find broken. Instead, they found survivors huddled in the shadows of burned-out towers, and at the center, humans standing watch over corpses still cooling in the dirt. One counselor approached cautiously, his robes unstained by battle. "The colony lives," he said, voice edged with disbelief. "You succeeded where our fleets could not. But at what cost?" His gaze lingered on the devastation, on the humans who stood more like executioners than saviors. Voss turned to face him, his scarred features illuminated by firelight. His voice carried the weight of an entire species. "You didn't send us to save them. You sent us because you were afraid to bleed. You wanted a tool. What you got was truth." He stepped closer, eyes locked on the counselors. "Survival is never clean. It's teeth and blood and fire. That's what it takes. And that's what we are." The counselor flinched under his gaze, words caught in his throat. Around him, survivors whispered, some in awe, others in fear, but none in denial. Rowan broke the silence with a bitter laugh. They didn't want aid. They wanted monsters. And monsters are what they got. Marcus closed his console with a final flick, the screen dark. "And now the galaxy will remember. Not the colony, not the council. Us." Voss's eyes lifted to the night sky, where the stars glimmered cold and distant. His voice was quiet, almost a murmur, but it carried through the plaza like a verdict. "When death calls, only we answer. And the galaxy would do well to remember why." The flames burned on, consuming what little remained untouched. The survivors gathered their dead, The counselors whispered their reports, and the humans stood apart, neither embraced nor condemned. They were not saviors. They were not conquerors. They were something far more dangerous. Men who had proven, once again, that humanity's place among the stars was carved not through kindness, but through survival paid in blood. And though the battle was over, the echo of their presence lingered, a promise and a warning carried on every breath of smoke into the endless dark. You said,